Where can I see people coming in?
I think she'll tell us where it's ready to go.
We're live, we're good. Okay. Welcome everyone. We're just rolling people on. No, we're live, good. All right. Hey everyone, what night are we? Nat, we're Wednesday?
Wednesday?
We're Wednesday for Wine and Wealth, which is probably not coincidental. So welcome. I hope everyone has some sort of drink. That's great. Thanks so much for tuning in at 6 o'clock. I know it's probably after a pretty crazy day, level 1. You might be back in the office or you might be home after a day in the office. So thanks so much for taking your time out tonight to listen to Hatch. We hope to keep it pretty casual. We normally do these things face to face, and so it's pretty weird. I can only basically see Natalie and not your faces. But also what it means is that you can kind of have us on and you can be doing other stuff too without us kind of feeling, sorry for ourselves, which is pretty cool. Yeah, we don't require your full attention. But yeah, welcome so much to Hatch webinar. We've done quite a few of these lately, particularly in lockdown. Doesn't mean we're getting better at them, but that's okay. We'll keep rolling. So I'm Kristen, the GM of Hatch, and I've got Natalie, who is the head of experience with Hatch, with us as well. She oversees basically everything from the first touch point in Hatch to designing the product and the vision of the product going forward. I make sure the wheels turn. I hire the right people. I get a bunch of fabulous people in the room, and just make sure that we're driving forward. And so we started with Hatch as this vision of this money platform, and that everyone deserves a private money manager. And so we've got this big vision of Hatch. It's going to be much more than what we currently are, but we wanted to start with kind of the most engaging thing, the most exciting thing that didn't exist in the New Zealand market, and that was, how can we make investing excitable, accessible, and doable? And so we thought, well, how about we give Kiwis the ability to invest in the world's most recognizable brands, the most popular funds, and actually to build these world-class portfolios and really exciting portfolios to grow their wealth. And so that's what we did. We've been in the market for 18 months. And we've learned a lot. So hopefully this webinar tonight is a little bit about that, about all the questions we've had coming, the barriers that we understand people who are just starting out might feel that they've got, and how we can overcome that. So that's basically Hatch right now. Happy to take any Hatch questions, but as well as any investing questions. There is all you have to do is basically comment on the YouTube video with your questions, and we see them come up. So feel free to pepper them throughout this chat, or we'll have a Q&A at the end as well. Just very quickly, I wanted to state that this isn't advice tonight. We can't give advice, but what we are talking about is general information. So this is kind of accepted best practices in investing. It's kind of what we've learned from all of our investors over the past 18 months, all the experts that we're surrounded by, but it's not tailored to your specific scenario. So if you've got a unique situation or very specific question, I'd invite you to consult with some of the fantastic financial advisors that are in New Zealand with your specific situation. Investing in the share markets has some risk, and all that risk means is that your money can go up and it can go down. It can do that quite quickly, especially lately over the last few months, if you've been watching the share markets do that. And so what it means is that with the share markets, you should be looking at having your money in for a longer period of time, so that the ups tend to outweigh the downs and grow over time. So most people on Hatch are kind of looking at that more than the 3 to 5 year kind of scenario. It's not a get rich quick, but rather a get rich slow. So wanted to kind of point out the risk, and also just want to talk about very quickly, we assume that you've got kind of, when you're looking at investing in the share markets, you shouldn't be piled up in credit card debt and kind of bad debt. you probably should sort that before investing. And the second thing is we're assuming that you've got kind of emergency savings on hand and you're not investing that in the share markets. So that obviously we come through crises in the past few months, you've got cash on hand to survive and you don't need to pull it out quickly. Finally, we're going to talk about some companies and funds tonight. When we talk about them, it's not specific advice to buy them. What we want to give you is a steer in the direction. These are some things that people are buying, or these are some really popular funds or well-known funds. And so just wanted to make that clear. And what we're trying to hope to do is to empower you to do some more research in those areas. So how tonight will run is we're going to talk, we're going to whine, and you can ask questions. Again, comment on the YouTube video with those.
And we are seeing some coming through, so keep them coming. We'll answer them as we go through.
Yep, good. I'll just finish my monologue and then I'll check them.
This is a money monologue.
Yeah, I know. Again, it's because I can't see your faces. Apologies in advance. But look, the webinar is this webinar really is about getting off the sidelines and kind of taking that first step. What we found is a lot of people get to a certain point and they've got some barriers. So we want to bust those down, and we just want to make you feel more comfortable to take that next step. You're here tonight, which is a great sign. Many of you have probably done the Getting Started course. Again, amazing. But your next step could be signing up to Hatch. It could be building a watch list. It could be making a deposit or your first investment, researching, or it could be actually buying shares. What we want this webinar to do is actually to have you take action, whatever that is for you. And I hope we make that easier for you tonight. So for those that can access their Hatch accounts and have those, I'd invite you to open them up, because if we talk about shares, it's a really great opportunity for you to watch list those, to build out a watch list, and to take action. So I'd recommend that you do that. As we talk, encourage you to do things like that, add to your watch list, write some notes. If you don't have your Hatch account open, that's cool, but certainly engage in the conversation. So like I said, we're going to cover off some in the next hour. We'll end right at 7 o'clock. We're going to cover off some common barriers to taking action. And then we'll talk about some common strategies that we've seen people take. And then we're going to end with a Q&A. So again, that's about just general investing and Hatch. So if you are a seasoned investor and you've come for another reason, you've been given a heads up. This is very much how do we get you over the barrier and getting you kind of started on this building your money journey. So we're going to hand over to Nat, who is going to start with covering off the common barriers to getting started.
Thanks, Kristen. Harvey, you're my new best friend. Thank you for saying that the application process was smooth. We don't like to call it an application process. Everyone is welcome to sign up. You don't have to apply, just get started. So what we thought we'd do is start. So we've been around for about 2 years now. And part of my job, and part of, I suppose, everyone at Hatch's job, is to really, really understand people and what makes us tick and what makes us scared or fearful or motivated to do better things. Because when you're talking about investing, it's not about diving into piles of money. It's about doing something that's really, really good for your future and your family's future, and in many ways your current self, the education you get, the lifestyle decisions you get to make. So but what we do find is there's 5 common groups of people when it comes to investing and barriers to getting started. So in those comments, as I'm going through and kind of rattling these off, please self-identify as one of them, because it can really help us figure out kind of what we should slant tonight's conversation to. You could just stick your hand up in the comments saying, I'm this crowd or I'm this crowd. And we'll talk a little bit about why these, we call them wealth woes at the moment, some of the things that are both the best thing you can have. They can turn you into a really, really well thought out strategic investor. But they're also quite often the things that stop you getting started. So you don't want as with most things, you don't want your best trait to also be your worst trait. So let's get started. And please write in the comments if you see a little bit of yourself in any of these. The first one is the I'm still learning crowd. And this is the crowd that kind of tricks themselves into thinking that one day you'll magically know enough and have enough information to start. We quite often talk about this as an affliction that a lot of women have when it comes to job interviews. And unless you know 110% of the job, you're not going to apply for the job. Same goes with investing. Unless you feel like you know an investor or the share markets inside out, you don't want to get started because you might get it wrong. The reason why that's bad is that you'll never know everything there is to know about the share markets. And a prime example of this that we talked about a couple of weeks ago is this guy, Warren Buffett, who is commonly known as one of the best investors who's ever lived. He's built this company. I think the returns annually, so the amount people's money grows when they invest in this company, I think it's well over 10% a year on average. This year, Warren Buffett took a big bet and decided that this was the year to really get in behind airlines. And his company, which deals with billions and billions of dollars, backed a lot of airlines. Last month, he had to sell all those shares because even the well-known best investor in the world did not know enough to know the future of a global pandemic. So that bugbear or that wealth woe is the not starting because you feel like you need to learn more. And we're going to go in after this into strategies. And I'm not seeing anyone identify as that. I don't know if everyone's being quiet, but we may not have any still learners on the line. The second one is that I'm scared of making the wrong decision crowd. And these people, quite often we talk to them and they're often in a relationship or they have a family. And the idea that they take on the responsibility of making a decision about the best place to put their family's money is absolutely terrifying. They're worried that their partner will judge them if they make the wrong decision. They feel the responsibility of taking on all of the stress and judgment that comes with making the wrong decision. So the reason why this is bad, I'm sure a lot of people could pick up on it, is you're paralyzed into not doing anything. And quite often for your long-term money building, one of the worst things you can possibly do is leaving your money stagnating in a bank account. And the reason for that is inflation. So every year, the price of things increases by about 2%. I don't know if anyone's checked out interest rates recently, but they're not that high. So that basically means if you put $1 aside in a bank account today, even at 1 to 2% interest, this time next year, even when you've been paid all that interest, your dollar might still be worth the exact same amount. You may be able to buy as much with it, or you actually may not be able to even buy as much with it, even though it's been sitting in a bank account. So being scared of making the wrong decision can lead you to not making a decision, which can actually do one of the worst things, which is leave you worse off. I'm seeing a lot of questions about Buffett, but I'm not seeing an awful lot about people identifying as any of these still. The third one is the I don't have enough money crowd. And this on the surface feels like a pretty logical reason. I don't have enough money to get started, so why should I? And it's quite interesting with this one because there's two really good arguments when you dig deeper into why it's bad. The first one is if you ask any investor who has discovered the benefits of growing their money, their biggest regret is that they didn't start earlier. I know I would have wished I'd have started when I was 15 and took my first kind of part-time job and started investing it, because that money would have been working for me now for 20 years. But the other thing that is a little known fact is if you wait to have the money, that's not the silver bullet that most people think it is. And all you have to do to figure that out is look to lotto winners. If you look at people who've won lotto, I think it's at least a third, maybe even 2/3 of them end up running out of money after even a large win. And the reason for that is because if you don't learn the money skills that goes along with having money, when you get the money, you still don't have those skills. So if you got paid $1 million yesterday and you've never practiced the skills required to manage that money or grow that money, you're not going to make the right decisions with it. So one of the best things you can do when you don't have the money is put in the time in learning about the ways you could manage money, or really scaling down and just using the money that you do have, putting aside really small amounts. People often call it paper trading, where you're not actually making an investment, but you're going through the motions and putting in place those good habits. You can still act even if you don't have the money. The fourth group is the financial PTSD crowd. This crowd is quite often the group who have missed the financial education, feels like they're the only ones who have. They didn't grow up in a family where people were very great at managing money. They've probably had a few experiences in life where someone's thrown a lot of jargon at them, or they've sort of walked into a bank and been made to feel stupid. They've watched too many movies about the Wolf of Wall Street, and they just feel like investing is not for them. It's become a wall in their brain. They're going to stick with their term deposits. This whole world is too scary. I even talked to my hairdresser today, and she said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "I work in investing." And she said, "Oh, it's all just numbers to me." And that's financial PTSD. She has blanked out the opportunity to grow her money because something somewhere along her life is ingrained in her that that's not for her. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons why that's bad. I like to relate it to the dodgy real estate agent. I don't know how many people here have bought a house, but the absolute worst thing you want is when you go in to buy a house and you love it and the real estate agent is really awful and you just don't want to do business with them. The only person you're hurting in that situation is yourself. The people who threw jargon at you, the people who made you feel like you didn't know enough, the gaps in your education, none of those things are impacted by you not growing your money. The only person who is that you, is you, and that's a real shame. So one of the things that we're committed to at Hatch is to make sure we do remove all the jargon and we do create a really safe space for people to not feel stupid about money, because a lot of us have had a long time feeling really stupid about it. So yeah, so I would, PTSD crowd. Well, we've got one. Well, I don't know if she is one. He is one. Final one, it's not the right time crowd. This is a very big crowd. And this crowd often talks about the exchange rates and share prices and trying to pick the best time. Is now a good time? A couple of weeks ago, the share markets had crashed. Oh, is it going to crash even further? I don't know if this is a great time. Now they've picked up again. Are shares too expensive? The exchange rate between New Zealand and the US, I don't know if I'm getting enough money. There's never the perfect time to start. And one of the things that a lot of investors talk about is time in the market rather than timing the market. Going back to our friend Warren Buffett, I mean, 2 years ago, I think making an investment in airlines was probably a very wise choice for him. He didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. And so just sometimes that not making a move because you're worried about not making the perfect move once again leads to not starting at all, and that money staying in that bank account and either staying the same or going down in value. So that's the 5. Passing back to you to talk about.
Yeah, I think we should just cover a quick couple of kids accounts someone asked about. So that is actually moved in to development. Yes, Natalie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you ask our dev team, which you actually probably shouldn't ask me instead, we're on track for about they might give you a different answer. We're on track for about optimistically about a month away. They should be ready to go. But in the meantime, we are heavily testing at the moment our referral program, so that should be ready to go live in the next week or so. So look out for that, for a little gift for sharing with your friends.
We hired a few new people over the lockdown, so hopefully we'll be starting to crank some of these features out, which is very exciting. Just quickly, a couple of the other questions was, sorry, I'll just deal with this. Someone asked about KiwiSaver and is now a good time to increase your contribution. Look, don't think of it again as that like timing the market. If you can afford to increase your contributions into KiwiSaver, I'd recommend it. KiwiSaver is great in that it's locked away. It's something you don't need to think about. It's kind of that set and forget fund. Thinking about investing, KiwiSaver being a portion of it, at least 10% of your income, so that you have enough to retire on. That's kind of what a lot of people kind of look to, like at least getting 10% of your income invested. So think about how KiwiSaver plays into that. How much of that do you want in KiwiSaver? The nice thing with KiwiSaver, it's kind of, again, that set and forget, comes off your paycheck, it's done. Government gives contributions and you have all sorts of options available. But is now the right time? I mean, again, that's that timing the market thing. I think KiwiSaver is meant to be for the long term, so that's probably a yes. Being in a more aggressive portfolio, if you have lots of time in the market, is probably something to consider as well. In terms of, sorry, someone was asking, oh, know it all. I think I want to know it all. Yeah, that's why we at Hatch, we say, yeah, so there's a know it all crowd where they want to kind of know everything before getting started. And we're real champions of learn by doing. And so that's what we're going to chat about tonight. So just make sure there's nothing else. Is airlines a good?
Doubling down on the kids accounts and the
yeah. And then there's an airline question about airlines. We just got Jets. Jets ETF has just rolled on to Hatch, and I'll go into a little bit about what a fund is, which kicks off my fund section, and this is how you can start. So there's what we've seen is people on Hatch have started by either investing in ETFs to start with, and then they add companies, or they start with a company and then add some funds and companies. And so I'm going to attack the fund and ETF exchange traded fund section, and that's going to attack the company section. So speaking of airlines, we've just added an exchange traded fund. I'll go into that in a minute, called Jets, which covers a broad base of the US airline industry, both airlines and manufacturers. So that's been quite popular. It's obviously taken a big dive, you know, with the global financial crisis, and has seen a huge spike as some of the restrictions have laid off. So that's specific to the US, of course. And what an exchange traded fund does is you're investing in a basket of shares. It could be 100 shares, it could be 3,000 shares or more. And what that means is that your one investment is spread across all of those investments in one trade. So it's really just a basket of companies bundled up into a fund. And so there's a number of ways that they manufacture them, or they build kind of these funds out. But the ones that are on Hatch are called exchange traded funds. And that really just means a fund that you can buy that's traded on the exchange. So it's traded on the share markets. That's, you know, you can obviously get into managed funds. So instead of buying shares in a fund like you might on the markets, you're buying units in a fund, in a managed fund. So that's kind of the big difference. But on Hatch, we have over 500 exchange traded funds, and they're a huge array. So let's talk about how people might start investing in funds. And you know what, like I said, it's kind of a basket. It's a very quick way to diversify. So if you've got, you know, $500 a month or $1,000 or more dollars a month to invest, and you don't want to spend the time to research all the companies that you could put that money into, you might just say, you know what, I'm going to put all of that money into a couple exchange traded funds, and they're kind of doing it for me. I know that it's spread across a bunch of companies, and I don't have all my eggs in one basket. So if I have everything in one company and that investment tends to go down, not very happy. Whereas an exchange traded fund, because it captures such a broad section of given, like it could be a sector, or it could be, a particular country or a stock market. If one company does poorly, it kind of balances out with all of the companies that tend to do well. So they're really easy, kind of set and forget, and really a good way to diversify. So I just want to chat a little bit about some really common ones. So some common, first actually, let's just talk about fund managers. You've probably heard of, well, let's say you haven't heard, but some names get thrown around like Vanguard. They just happen to be a fund manager, and they produce tons and tons and tons of these funds, which are listed on the exchange and called exchange traded funds. So they're quite popular. Vanguard ETFs. Another company you might have heard of is called BlackRock, and that's another really big one that produces a lot of really cool exchange traded funds. And the other, kind of the third biggest in the world, is called State Street, and their funds are all kind of named as people call them SPDR, SPDR. So Vanguard, BlackRock, which is kind of under the label of iShares, and SPDR, which is State Street, are kind of the big popular ones. But then there's lots of others. There's Schwab and ARK and whatever. Anyway, the point is there's these big
all of these on Hatch, by the way, if you're playing along at home. Just have to on Hatch and find some of the common ones.
So their job is to produce, basically produce, really cool baskets of companies, so that we can invest kind of and spread our money across a bunch of them. So some really common ones are ones that follow the US 500 of the biggest companies in the US. And so that's usually something that's called an S&P 500 or US 500. And really all you're doing is you're buying a very small slice of 500 of the biggest companies in the US. And that one's very, very popular. And it basically is, when people talk about the market, the US share market, they would talk about that one, the S&P index. That Standard & Poor's is what it stands for. And it's really just an index. Think of it as kind of a benchmark of the performance of these 500 companies. And so a fund just tracks it. So if these 500 companies are doing well, your fund increases in value, the share price goes up and is doing well. So we saw that S&P 500 share price and fund itself go really, really well right up until kind of mid-March and the big crash, and then it tumbled, and then it since has recovered. So that's the US S&P 500s are very popular. There's two on Hatch that are really popular for those that are watch listing. One is the Vanguard S&P 500. That is the ticker. The ticker is really just the symbol that it's listed under, VOO. So you can search for VOO. And the other one is the State Street one, is it BlackRock, which is called SPY, and that's SPY. That's the ticker of that one. So those are two of the probably most popular ones for you to check out. Then there's the NASDAQ 100, which NASDAQ is another index, and it basically tracks the 100 companies, large companies in the US in technology and healthcare, but it is centered a little bit more to technology. And that ticker is QQQ. So that's another really popular and common exchange traded fund. Then you can do things like go into the total share market. So if you just want to invest your money across the world and kind of get a really, really broad section. So you don't want to just be in the US, or you don't want to just be in kind of the NASDAQ, which again is the US and kind of tech. You might want to go for the whole world stock market exchange traded fund. And some really popular ones there is the Vanguard one, which is VTI. And another one is the iShares, which is BlackRock, and that's ACWI. So those are a couple to check out. And again, that tracks the broad share market. And then there's some European ones, which are popular. Just quickly, tickers are VGQ and HEDJ. And then the final exchange traded funds that are kind of, again, like popular, boring, just really common are bonds and bond ETFs. And what a bond is basically a government, it's basically a government loan. So you're investing in, the government's taking your money, and in return, they're paying you an interest rate, and which basically means dividends. So it's, while it grows slower than some of these other ones, like you can imagine the NASDAQ 100 has probably got a lot of growth stocks in it. We can chat about that later. A bond ETF probably isn't going to grow as quickly, but you are going to get kind of some really stable dividends in that. And some popular bond ETFs are LQD and SHY, SHY. So again, those are just that's what we're seeing on Hatch. And what that leads me to is to kind of the boring set and forget. And so for first-time investors or beginning investors that just want to get going with a portfolio that they want to kind of self-manage, they may want to choose 2 to 3 exchange-traded funds and just kind of set and forget, and then start to think about, playing on the edges. And so some really, really common fund, if you were to pick 2 and 3, generally, if you were to Google that strategy, they would say, look, pick one that covers the US share markets. So that's, covers like some of the most popular recognizable companies of today. And then choose a total world, and then choose a bond. So I think I've named those, and you're kind of splitting those up based on kind of your personal preference. Again, the bond is like safer. So if you're nearing retirement, you might want to have a little bit more in kind of that bond one, whereas the US stock market one might be like the S&P 500 that I talked about, might be kind of a more growth one, because again, it includes some of those really popular tech companies that we know, and then the total world stock market. So that's kind of, you have to figure out how you're going to split those if you choose to do that strategy. But it is, you shouldn't overcomplicate it when you're looking at just having a bulk money in kind of the set and forget way. So start small. You can set and forget. There's auto invest feature that you can use, and it takes the pressure off picking all these individual companies. You're kind of just backing a few ETFs. You're good to go.
interrupt there.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've heard a few times from people getting started, especially people who've gone through the Getting Started course, and we have a whole section on exchange traded funds and ask people to go and actually check out like the Vanguard website and see the different metrics to look at what's important in a fund. And we absolutely are open, and we've had this happen a few times where people have gone in, and this is the finance world, so they go into Vanguard's website and they're hit with a wall of information. Come to us, just send us an email and say, help, I've gone in to look and I don't understand and I'm panicking, and we can walk you through those bits of information and what they mean. We
point you in the right direction.
So if you, because we can quite happily, you know, say Vanguard S&P 500, but when you're in the Vanguard website, it feels there's a lot happening. So do not be shy about coming to us to ask for some of those really detailed things and what they mean. And we're more than happy to point you in the right direction.
Cool. And then the other cool thing with Hatch, with having 500 exchange traded funds, which can feel overwhelming, but just don't forget there's kind of the boring popular ones, and they are for a reason. They tend to be low fee. They cover huge amounts of the market. You don't have to stay up at night worrying about a company that's going to go under. But you can actually invest in exchange traded funds and tailor a really unique portfolio to what you care about and things that you back. And so with Hatch, you can invest in, commodities like gold or silver, which have been popular with the recession. Happy to chat about that. You can invest in industries like healthcare and biotech. Those have also been quite popular lately, as I'm sure people can kind of connect the dots and like, oh yeah, there's been this huge increase of PPE gear and hospitals and all sorts of healthcare supplies. And so those shares, those ETFs have been doing quite well. Technology, obviously, if you know technology, you feel like you understand it, you back the growth of technology as a sector. There's some really popular technology exchange traded funds. Again, I'm happy to call out tickers if people want me to, but I'll just leave it at that. And then you can also back megatrends that are kind of shaping the world. And so e-commerce, there's actually an exchange traded fund on e-commerce. There's lots on renewable energy and clean energy. One comes to mind is iClean, ICLN. That's quite a popular green, clean energy exchange traded fund. And even social media. I think I saw a social media one roll onto Hatch about a month ago. So if that's in a sector that you kind of feel, oh, I kind of back that sector and I know it, obviously, here we are on social media. That's something that you might choose to back as well, kind of on the side. So really, I think you don't need to overcomplicate it. You can start with really basic funds inside of this portfolio and you can set and forget. But then I think exchange traded funds with these big fund companies that I talked about have gotten so sophisticated that they've gotten right down to, like I said, like cannabis. You can invest in a cannabis exchange traded fund instead of picking the one company that's going to do well. It's called MJ, and you can invest in a bunch of them. There's a gender diversity one that's the ticker is SHE, SHE, and you can back companies that have females as CEOs and leadership positions. You can back, like I said, jets. That's the airline industry one. So again, you shouldn't be putting all your money into one of those things. That's probably not a great strategy. But just to start, get kind of the basics done, and then you can look at kind of putting your money what matters to you and how the future that you back. So now I'm going to hand it over to Nat. I'll check the photo, the comments. I do that.
I'll ask you a few questions that people have been asking. So there's a couple about the countries that you can invest in. So can you invest in emerging markets, ETFs, and some, Joanna said, I believe these are all for US shares.
So they're US listed shares. And what that means is that the shares that we offer through Hatch are listed on the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. But just talking to exchange traded funds, these fund companies are basically building funds that can expose to the entire world. So when I'm investing in an emerging markets fund through the US, it doesn't matter what's happening in the US. What matters is that I'm just accessing this fund on the US share markets, and it matters what's happening in the emerging markets. So really, the US share markets are the largest, most liquid share markets in the world. And you can access basically everything. And so by investing in a share on there, it doesn't necessarily mean you're invested in US. You can invest in Alibaba, you can invest in Tencent, you can invest in a China exchange traded fund. You name it there. So it just means, yeah, it basically just means that it's listed on the largest share market in the world. So I hope that helps. And I guess the benefit is that going direct to these funds is that the expense ratios, which we can talk about kind of jargon a little bit later, but it's basically the annual fees that these fund managers charge is quite low. So the one that we talked about, the VOO, for example, that's the Vanguard S&P 500. That's 0.03% a year to invest in that, which is very, very low. So we can chat about that a little bit more. Are we good? We want to talk about companies now?
I've got one more.
Yeah.
Can you talk on the risk versus reward for ETFs? I limit your risk, but does it also limit your potential gains?
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So if you think about investing in Amazon versus a technology ETF, they've probably done quite well over the last 10 years. But the risk of Amazon not doing well because of a Trump tweet or maybe a new Trump regulation, or let's say, we saw Elon Musk, for example, say break up Amazon last week. There's some risks about putting all of your money in Amazon, but also if you were to have invested in Amazon a decade ago, you would be doing very, very well right now. Whereas you wouldn't necessarily, you'd only have a slice of Amazon in that technology ETF, and the whole tech sector has done well, but you wouldn't have grown. So risk and reward is basically investing, and what the returns on investment and the dividends are paying you for is taking that risk. And so you're going to be paid more the more risk you take. And that's why your KiwiSaver, growth portfolio is riskier. But the general thinking is that over the long period of time, it's a better choice for you in terms of. So I hope that answered a little bit the reward risk.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay,
cool.
We've got another one which I think we'll talk about later about, is it best to just do a big lump sum or put your money in over time? And I've seen a few about tax, so I'll quickly cover off the tax stuff and then move into
companies.
Second major strategy. Tax is a lot simpler than people think, and especially a few people here have said the tax, getting an accountant to do a tax return, is charging more than it's worth. Absolutely. When you have under 50,000 New Zealand dollars invested overseas, we in Hatch every year give you the total amount of income you've earned through dividends and the total amount of tax you've already paid in the US. Two numbers, literal numbers. The IRD every year makes it easier and easier to fill out a tax return. You plonk those two numbers in, you're good. Even easier than that is the IRD this year, front and center on their tax return page, is to say if you have earned less than $200 in income outside the stuff that's already taxed, so outside the PAYE that you pay, don't even bother to file a tax return. So when you're starting to invest, tax should not be a barrier. It's very, very straightforward. And those smaller levels, even when you tip over the 50,000, we have a whole webinar on that as well. It's not what people think. Technology is your friend here. It's made life a lot simpler. But yeah, don't tax on small amounts. Hit us by email if you want to find out more. We've got a whole bunch of information, but it is really as simple as two numbers in your tax return. And yeah, it's absolutely not the fearful thing. Tax is scary in general, but we all have to pay it and we all have to suck it up, but it's not hard to do. So let's move on to the second strategy is we don't ask for your IRD number and sign up because we don't pay the tax for you. If you invest in New Zealand funds, it's invisible to you. You're still paying tax. You just don't see it all the time. But because you're filling out your own tax return when you are paying tax for Hatch, we don't need to know your IRD number, and we don't ask for stuff that we don't need to know because that's your business.
Sorry, liquidity. Yeah, U.S. share markets are highly liquid. Your order when the markets are open. Yeah, I mean, there's millions and millions of people trading on that market. So the exchange is really just someone selling and you're buying, and there's no issues. It gets filled within seconds. I should note very quickly though with Hatch is that we work with a broker, a digital broker that likes quality over quantity, and so we do have some restrictions with the shares listed on Hatch. That includes pricing over $1, which makes sense because when you're creeping under $1 on the New York Stock Exchange, they put you on the watch list anyway, and you're at risk of being delisted. So share prices need to be over $1. which isn't that hard on the US share markets, and market capitalization. Now, that basically means the share price and the number of shares. It's kind of an indication of how big the company or the fund is. And we like to keep exchange traded funds over kind of that 300 million and companies over 1 billion. And what that means is that they tend, it's just a very general indicator of quality. They're not penny stocks. They're not, they tend to be stable. And so for Kiwi investors who aren't, day traders, we just feel better with kind of a curated list of slightly, generally speaking, higher quality, relatively speaking, I should say. So Nat, let's just chat very quickly about companies and the other strategy of getting started.
Second big strategy, so you've got your set and forget. A lot of people buy into that, and that's brilliant. I think Kristen and I are both big fans of set and forget. It's a really simple, really solid way to grow your money over time. The other way you can look at it when it comes to making that first step and making that first investment, this is that big barrier that a lot of people struggle to get over, and it is a big mental block, is to back a brand you believe in. And it's not as simple as throwing your money in a company because everyone else is doing it. There's a really easy, very sensible way to look at it. And there's a huge amount of benefit to it. The biggest one is you break that mental barrier. And one of the biggest blockers that a lot of us in New Zealand especially have is that we just don't think of ourselves as investors. It feels like too financy or all about numbers. And just by making that step, and I've heard countless stories now. I just got off the phone before with a workmate who has spent years trying to get his friend to start investing and couldn't get him across the line, and then now he's getting texts every day because once he made that first investment, he's like, oh my goodness, this is so great. So sometimes it is just a matter of being like Nike and just doing it. I think buying shares in a company, you can call it the lazy person's guide to owning a business. Owning a business is hard. Buying shares in a business that someone else is running, very easy. So it's kind of a cool thing to do to become a owner in a business. But one of the things is, so I suppose there's two major concepts here when you're doing that first time backing a brand you believe in. Firstly is change your mental model for this. You're not making an investment. You're educating yourself. So rather than thinking I'm going to take $100 of investment money and I'm freaking out about losing that $100, take $100 of education money that you would spend on a book or a series of books, and don't worry about losing it. It's your $100 of education money or $50 of education money. Don't worry about the fees. Don't worry about anything. Think of it as money that you are spending rather than investing, and you're spending it or you're investing it in your education. And the reason why that's important is because it removes all those deeply held beliefs about the fear of losing, the fear of things going wrong. You've taken all that pressure off your shoulders and you're just educating yourself. So then the second part about it is one of Warren Buffett, bought the airlines. One of his phrases that really, really speaks to me is invest in a business, don't trade stocks, otherwise known as the difference between trading and investing. And it's a very, very important difference, even though you're fundamentally doing the same thing. So trading, which is the Wolf of Wall Street, the stuff that people kind of know about a lot from the 80s, is when you sort of go in and you're analyzing a share price or a stock price, and you're going, same thing by the way, and you're going, oh, Air New Zealand, I saw a comment about Air New Zealand, their stock price has dropped to 80 cents, I'm jumping in. Investing is, as someone said in these comments, Air New Zealand seems like a really quality company. I can see that the government's decided to invest in it, to bail it out. I can see a future for it. So I'm making a considered investment in this business. I want to become an owner of this business. I back it. Two very different strategies. One is very much trying to make a quick buck and sort of almost if you don't know what you're doing, and a lot of traders do, and they do okay. But if you don't know what you're doing, you're basically gambling. Whereas buying into a business, if you think, do I want to be the lazy person who owns a business rather than building a business from scratch? Do I want to be an owner of Air New Zealand? Well, what does it need to look like for me to want to be an owner of that company? And sort of just having a very simple philosophy like that. And your first investment, treat it as education money. So the reason why that's really important to start with the investing in a business that you believe in is, and we saw this a lot over lockdown when the share markets dropped in value, and a lot of people saw their KiwiSaver dropping in value. And one of the things that a lot of people immediately did was try and switch and basically sell out all their shares, which is basically what your KiwiSaver is, at a loss, and move it into another fund that basically they call it locking in the loss. You've now sold your shares for a small amount of money. You don't have those shares anymore. So when they go back up in value, which they generally do, you don't make any of those gains. The reason why people do that is because the only information they know about their KiwiSaver a lot of the time is the price of it, the amount they've got invested in it. Whereas if you're investing in a company that you believe in, you know a lot more about it. You know, for example, I'm going to go back to the Air New Zealand example, but really do just think of it as an example. If you back that Air New Zealand, despite the lockdown, despite the fact that they can't travel outside the country that much at the moment, if you truly believe that they have great fundamentals as a company, and you followed the news and you think that they are worth 20 years' time, that they will be the business that they aren't now, that they'll grow into something that they can't be right now, you're making a very different decision. And when tomorrow, if the share price drops, which it could well do, no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow, you don't mind, because you know that you back that company. So it just gives you that really, that extra bit of comfort to not focus on the day-to-day movements of the share price, because you're an owner of a company that you believe in. I just thought I'd quickly whip through some examples of actual Hatch investors and how they have started. So one of the companies that we list is Beyond Meat, which is plant-based protein. We have a fair few vegans who miss burgers, and they saw Beyond Meat come in, and they, as people who are used to going out into restaurants and everyone chowing down on their animal meat, and they saw a shift because they're paying attention, because they're vegans, and they saw these companies coming through and creating these revolutionary products that they truly believe are changing the way we will eat in the future. So their first share purchase, and the reason why they found Hatch was because they were so excited about this new industry, and they had the opportunity to back it. The other one is, we quite often see it, and it's actually in some ways, depending on how early they found it, a lot of people who can't quite afford a Tesla yet, or a Ferrari, both of which you can buy through Hatch, can't afford a full Tesla, but they can buy shares in Tesla. It's a company that they really identify with, that they love talking about. Same with Ferrari, they love watching the Grand Prix or whatever, and they can buy a share in the company, or a fraction of a share. So that's the thing that they truly believe in, and that's what got them across the line to invest that first $100 and really back a company that they genuinely care about. The other one that I thought was really interesting recently was someone who just went, oh, it finally hit them as a light bulb moment. This person has spent a fortune on Apple products over the years. They have the Apple computers, they've had multiple iPhones. And she said, I'm kicking myself that I never thought to invest in Apple. I use their products religiously. I see a world around me of Apple. I know them inside out. I believe in the company. And now she's making money off the fact that she's backed this company that she really believes in, and that she understands. So those are some examples, and all of them in common have a couple of things. People have used their unfair advantage, and it's really easy to forget this when you're that you have a unique set of knowledge and experience that not everyone else has, and quite often it's a lot more than you think. So yeah, if you're a designer and you're working on Apple products, you know a lot more about Apple than average Joe public. If you are an exercise or a yoga fiend, you're in that community. You can see Lululemon all around you, and you can see the brands people are using, and you can see the shifts in how they're using them. Same with the makeup industry. Whatever your niche is, and we've had a few people in hospitals who come in and they've found these brands that I've never heard of, but they're like, we're using them every day in the hospital. You have an unfair advantage, and all of these people who've started by buying just a small slice of a company that they really believe in have taken advantage of that unfair advantage that they have. And then the second thing, I think, the final thing on this, and we can ask questions, but we've only got 12 minutes, is don't be afraid to that you'll be bored. I think a lot of people think, oh, I don't like, I'm going to invest in Apple, and then I'm going to have to follow it. That almost almost without fail, every single person who has had this huge mental barrier to making that first investment, when they've backed something they believe in, they become an obsessive fan. They notice it. It's like when you buy a red car and you suddenly notice red cars everywhere. When you buy a share in any company that you believe in, you'll start to see news about them everywhere, and you'll start to naturally find yourself becoming this fanatical follower of everything that they do. Trust that it will happen naturally. Don't worry about having to force yourself to keep following them once you've invested in them. I'm yet to find someone who struggles once they've made that first step.
And I think that just to round that off is kind of the whole learn by doing with this kind of small investment as a company, is that you can watch the share price go up and down. You know, have to kind of emotionally be cool when it goes down, and use it as a learning experience as to why it goes down, because sometimes it has to do with the company, but a lot of times it has to do with market stuff. And so that I see a question about value investing. So that is, we're probably looking at a 2.0, you know, if our getting started course is 101, we're probably looking at a 201 course, and that might be different investing strategies. And so that's when you're like hooked and you're like, okay, how am I going to continue investing? Value investing is one of those. The greatest investor of all time, Warren Buffett, is a well-known value investor. And what they're doing is they're looking for companies that are basically undervalued. So the share price is low, but because of other things. So that might be the market is doing weird things, or you know, something outside of their control has happened, but the company is actually still really strong. And so Warren Buffett likes to take advantage of that situation and buy shares in companies where their stock prices tend to be low, a bit lower than they kind of should be. And so I won't go much into more detail. That's something we might do with the 201 course. But growth investing, we also had a question as we kind of lead into the last 10 minutes of questions, I think. Q&A, open to them, ask them. We've got a few that also were sent before. Another one before was like, how to identify growth companies. And just to kind of de-jargon that, well, actually it's not, because growth company is really like a company that's growing faster than others. And so I talked about Amazon earlier, some of the tech stocks that we know, some of the really popular companies on Hatch, if I could name them, would be Tesla, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, AMD, Nvidia, Netflix, Disney. These companies would be considered growth stocks. They might not necessarily pay a dividend, so they're not paying you to invest in them, because what they want to do as part of their profits, they're like, thank you for investing in us, here's a bit of a dividend. Instead of doing that, they're taking all that money, reinvesting so that they can do a big land grab. Like Netflix is a great example. They're like, we're not going to pay you dividends because we are a growth stock. We're a growth company. We're reinvesting everything into growth, to getting into India, getting into you name it, because the more subscribers we have, the more money we have. And so that would be considered a growth stock. So how might you identify those? Again, had you invested in Amazon 10 years ago? I think, again, it's kind of looking around you. How are your behaviors? First of all, you can invest in growth ETFs. If you just search growth ETF, either on Google or in Hatch, we will have those on Hatch. So a fund manager like a BlackRock or Vanguard does that for you, and they basically get a basket of companies together that they feel are growth companies together. But take a look, back to Nat's point, take a look even of, not at your unfair advantage, we'll do that, but also take a look around you at the world. And this is what Warren Buffett does. He's like, if I were to look at I would just ask a 5-year-old kid, because what's a 5-year-old kid eating and drinking and doing? So look at how your kids are using technology. Look at your food behaviors. Look at how you're ordering food online. And you can take a look at where you're dining out. You're probably using Netflix more than you're using TV right now. And so these are considered really signals of potential growth companies. So just be really aware of those things around you. Watch list them. Take a look, watch them over time, Google search some of this stuff yeah.
I think the other thing, because I'm a growth investor, the thing with growth investing, and I think for locally, Xero is a great example of this. When when they listed, if you read the news about them, you'd think that they were going bankrupt every day. And I think one of the things about growth companies is they're quite often in industries, they're higher risk. And by that I mean they are the innovators. They are the people changing the world. They are creating industries or trends on their own a lot of the time. So when you invest in one, you quite often are backing their 20-year vision. And part of the reason why they are growth companies, or you believe them to be growth companies, is that they're doing something that's never been done before. So quite often at the start, you may, which is why it's kind of quite a different strategy than value investing. You are backing yourself, which is why it's really important to kind of really dig into everything possible. And it's not just talking to experts, it's reading all their, a lot of people read their investor center, which most of these companies have. Watch their CEO talk, really see what they're trying to say. And a lot of times people miss that. And so like, you know, your average journalist doesn't necessarily spend their entire day doing as much digging as you do about a company or an area that you really believe in. So you can quite often find opportunities by really deeply understanding what the company is trying to say that no one is picking up on yet. But like I say, high risk, because they are also, you know, if they can't pull it off, they can't pull it off. And when you're doing something that's never been done before, quite often that can be, you know, quite a possibility. And
also, and I mean, Uber might be a good example. Like that's the typical changed how we do transportation. But then all of a sudden you have all sorts of stuff happen. Like you've got, you know, internal culture that broke down. You've got competitors that come in. And so it's finding that next company is not a sure thing.
And I think Uber is a great example as well, because Uber was great, but Tesla is creating self-driving cars. What's going to happen to Uber if Tesla manages to create a network of cars that don't need drivers anymore?
We know you're a Tesla lover, Nat.
Yeah. But I mean, that's a really interesting thing to look at. Like Uber is doing something that's great, but is there another competitor coming through that could?
Gonna leapfrog. Yeah. No, fair call. So 201 course, we're getting some yes thumbs up on that. We've got 5 minutes left. If you've got any questions, feel free to talk about that. Someone's asking about PE ratio. I'm not going to put all of you to sleep. Oh my gosh, it's 7 o'clock. We've got a blog on like kind of the 4 ratios to look at. If you just kind of and kind of it talks about the 4 most popular ratios that investors look at. And ratios are basically, yeah, that's like 201. It's kind of getting into the actual, you're looking at the financial statements of the company and trying to come up with a couple really quick metrics to be like, is that good compared to industry average, or is that bad? So I think there's a blog on that. We'll kind of go, we'll kind of talk about that.
The main thing to think about with all those things, all those sort of techniques people use to value businesses, is they're all different ways to value a business. And that's all they are. If any one single one of them was bang on all the time, everyone would be using the same one. So don't subscribe to this is the one true path, because even when we're talking about Warren Buffett, to go back to him, he didn't pick it. So all of these things are really good indicators that all investors have different strategies and use a different set. And that's another really important thing to remember, is that there's no one path to success in investing. Different investors have different approaches, and all of them can be quite valid. So use those if they appeal to you. Also check out the debate online about, you can browse around in Google for different people and their opinions on different ratios and when they work and when they don't work, and why them. And our blog, yeah.
The blog on Hatch, for that person asking, is how to research shares, 4 easy steps for beginners. It might not, yeah. Anyway, check that out. Oh my gosh, we're asking. Yeah, we won't get into Bitcoin. We don't know Bitcoin. We don't know.
That's all right. So I suppose just I think the thing to finish up. Should we just do one last one, because we're going to be doing these just so everyone knows. I think to wrap up really quickly. The purpose of this, we are ladies of action. The purpose of this is very much, you've all come along tonight to take that next step, whatever it may be. So please do. If you want to take a next step, If it's adding stuff to your watch list, if it's emailing us to say, what were those ticker symbols again and what does that mean? If it's signing up to the course, whatever your action is, please do it, because going back to those sort of wealth woes, don't stay in that cycle of letting your one barrier keep you back or your multiple barriers keep you back. Use this as an opportunity to take a step forward. We can continue the conversation in various other channels, and we can and we'll be doing more webinars every month anyway, so bring more questions. Very much appreciate the questions tonight. There was a ton of them.
Yeah.
And we've plenty more opportunity, but like if we haven't answered it, just send us an email and we'll point you in the right direction. We have a ton of resources and we'll be doing more of them.
Yeah. hello@hatchinvest.nz. Just reach out. We do have a Facebook club that you can connect. Just search up Hatch Facebook Investors Club. For those that don't have Facebook, we hear you. Something potentially we'll look to bringing the community inside the app one day because we think that'd be super cool. So yeah, we'll look to that. But please feel free to reach out on all sorts of the channels that you can reach out, ask all sorts of questions, and we are here to help. And happy investing, everyone.
Make sure you from Facebook Club. I feel like that's Julie. Who's a very
hi, Julie.
Hi, Julie.
Julie was at the very beginnings of Hatch, so nice to see her. Do a TED Talk. Oh, I love it. Great channels, great comments, everyone. Have a great night. Go chill. Go chill now. Go grab a drink and Netflix chill and have a good one. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.